All right. Good afternoon. So happy to be here back in my school. It's so wonderful. This new building was not there when I have graduated. Daniel's school was there. So happy to see our universities keep growing and having a wonderful position in the world, list of wonderful universities. I'm so happy that so many people came out. Thank you very much for being interested in Mongolia.
Somebody turn the sound up a little or move the mic.
Yep, that should be like here. I have two mics, so. How about that now? Better? Better, okay, thank you. Before I start, I want to small housekeeping things, and I keep writing since 2009 every week on current Mongolian economic, political, and social issues, the most hot issues of that week. I try to pick up, and I write in Mongolian, and it's published in Mongolian newspaper, daily newspaper called Unodur, and then after 4 days, it is also published in English in a daily newspaper called UB Post. And all these articles since 2009, July 1st, I haven't missed a week since, unless it is some public holiday. So all this together meant into, up to the beginning of this year, into 3 books. This is the book in English. And it is just published, and I would like to present one copy to the Department of Globalization of our school.
Thank you very much.
And second copy, I would like to acknowledge one young lady here who was interim in Mongolia, who was reading the last proofreading of these books. IMBA student Laura Steele. Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. It's also on my website, jargaldefacto.com, and along with TV interviews I do de facto for last 5 years. So my media work becoming so comprehensive and a lot overwhelming that I had to quit my job, in which I'm happy about, because my country now need independent, non-partisan voice on the issues, because as any other emerging country, we go through really serious transitions. So the topic of today's my short presentation is triple transition of Mongolia. And I would like to share my thoughts on this triple transition with each of you, because it is 25 years elapses since we started this democratic change. And this gentleman is a Mongolian speaker of Mongolian parliament who was here 2 years ago, who is also alumni of this university. And I made an interview before I depart with him on current issues, and we accidentally happened to wear our own alumni ties. So everybody was surprised, why these two guys have the same tie of DU. So I'm proud of it. DU and American schools are playing an important role in leadership management of the country. But it doesn't mean that everything goes so well. So that's the point I want to share with you today. So let me talk a bit about where we are now after 25 years and what are challenges and opportunities of Mongolia today. So first about economic transition. Economic transition from Mongolia. Economic transition in Mongolia is happening from centrally planned socialist economy to free market. So how are we doing on that? So I would today I will be more critical on what are still challenges there. Of course, there are a lot of achievements we made. I think we made a lot of achievements compared to many countries for 25 years. We have done from per capita income $400, we made into $4,500 during these years. It's a mining-dependent economy today, and we export copper, coal, gold to China. And when Chinese economy comes up, our economy goes up. If it goes down or is stagnating, then we have problem. About 1% economic downturn in Chinese economic growth brings 1.2% worldwide impact. For Mongolia, it's almost 2 or 3%. And with last 2 years commodity price changes, we have a lot of economic problems. And then we have two camps now in the country who are blaming for all these things what's happening in the world economic market, but the other side talking about the factors to be inside, domestic. But now I would like to go through several points of this economic transition. A is principal issue of differences between two centrally planned economy and market economy is property issue. Before we had not property, private property. I mean, by 1990, there were no private property in the country, and those who were trying to have some production or something entrepreneurship all were somehow prosecuted. And today, we have more private property than state property. But however, it is because as a result of big-scale privatization process through different voucher and many different systems, we have privatized to each citizen, that time, state-owned enterprises, which was good start. And of course, it was not ideal. It made some people, few people rich, because the shares were sold outside of the stock exchange. So they would travel outside of the country, remote areas, convincing somebody to sell the shares. At the end, they had physically that yellow voucher in hand, which made few people very rich, which was the first capital in the country. I think by 2000, they were already in the hands of few people. Yet we have now further increasing state-owned enterprises in Mongolia. In spite of all the commitment by all political parties, politicians to have more, less state-owned enterprises, we have now more state-owned enterprises. In particular, in the boom of mining, so-called strategic ownership of large deposits, mining deposits, 34% to be owned by Mongolian people, Mongolian state. There was a new law, and under that they have created several state-owned enterprises, which all unfortunately work very poorly, not effective, with all losses. And a good example is Irdines Tavan Todre, ATT, which is made on 34% of, to be 34% of the largest coking coal mine in the south of the country. And this coal can feed China for years to come. And with this coal, we are competing with Australia. And we were the once largest importer of China for coal. Today, we have problem. Why? I think because the state-owned enterprises. And that state-owned enterprises, 3 years ago, 2011 at the end, 4 years ago, made a contract with Chinese state-owned company called Chalco. But the government insisted to have a front payment, and they got $350 million of prepayment of future revenue, future sales revenue. And what the government did was they have channeled it through so-called Human Development Fund instead of Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is still their talk, not existing yet. And they have channeled this money, and plus $200 million from another large project, OT, very famous project. Some of you even were there. This is the largest undeveloped copper coal deposit in the world. We can compete it with Chile with this copper, very high content copper. Then also they took the government, coalition government at that time took $100 million from prepaid tax, so-called, from Erdenet, another copper mine with joint venture with China, with Russia. It's all since '74 copper concentrate plant, and Russia and Mongolian governments co-own this mine, and they used to have this tax before even they made a profit. So all this money have gone through this Human Development Fund to give to everybody the promised money at campaign election 2008. Two largest political parties were competing by promising who is a larger sum to cash to everybody. One company said, we will give every citizen $1,000. The other said, no, then we will give 1.5 million tugriks, at that time the equivalent of it, of $1,000 in Mongolian tugriks. So they were competing with that cash promises, and by the next election, 2012, election was coming, next election, but the money was not there. So they were, as I just now said, collected this money and distributed. And it's a very populistic move. After they understood it is not going to be right way, they made a new law forbidding promising cash as an election campaign. But it was in past. Then back to the state-owned enterprises. Today, that state-owned Irtines Tawan Talga company has even more debt. It is almost $800 million that they have today. Still not supplying properly coal to China under many circumstances. Due to many circumstances. Prices went down, logistics expensive, but it didn't work out. And I just say that if that state-owned enterprise was not made, Mongolia would not ending up with almost $1 billion debt today. So when this sort of large enterprise is owned by state, and when the political parties which have no transparency with that activity, a big fund is gone in a very populistic way. It is not economic, productive way used. So this is just one example of state-owned enterprises. Second example is, for example, Mongolian National Airlines. Mongolian National Airlines, every political party before election promising to privatize that airline. Every single party. As soon as they take power, they never privatize it. And this because it's national carrier, flag carrier. And all these things what I'm talking about, I wrote at that given week an article of more details. For example, Mongolian Airlines having very monopolistic cooperation with Korean Airlines, we would not allow other airlines to compete. And as a result, we pay maybe 30% higher price for this route, Ulaanbaatar, Seoul. And yet this airline is always with loss. They have jailed previous almost CEO, vice president, some 10 people jailed for wrongdoing, mismanagement. But still they don't privatize. Irdinet, Mongolian Railways, joint venture with Russia since 1949. 51% owned by the Mongolian government, still running with always loss. So I see that in state-owned enterprises are running with loss because it's run by people not merit-based, by people who are nominated by political parties who takes power. So I keep saying now, of course I make a lot of people unhappy with this comment, it's not state-owned enterprises, it's party-owned enterprises. So this is in terms of ownership. I think in Mongolia and many other countries, as soon as these state-owned enterprises are dominating in the economy with a lot hard involvement of political powers, then are always running with losses. Nobody is taking responsibility for that. A big issue in economic transition, price regulation. Free market is setting price. That's what we know. That's what is this country about. That's what is every country who is performing well in terms of economy. And yet we have still controlling some 34 items of consumer goods, starting electricity, food, meat, and flour. Meat, very strange. Mongolia has 3 million people, land size of Texas, one of the most less populated country in the world, 17th largest territory. We have 3 million people, 50 million cattle. And yet our beef price is more expensive than here. Paradoxic, right? 70% of milk consumption in capital city is imported. And I think all this is because of price regulation, price restriction, which is not sustainable for long run. As we know, price is not only the level that you change commodities. Price is information. And with the restricted price information, with restricted market information, people have a hard time to predict correctly the future of the market because it's skuvek. So that's the reason why we have still expensive meat and why we don't have our agriculture potential being not used fully. And we have so-called for farmers fund that is subsidizing farmers to grow wheat. And the wheat now we are self-sustainable, but at which cost? I think it is the cost maybe 2 times more than the market price they sell wheat. They restrict wheat to a certain level, and they give subsidized loan to the farmers, then subsidized loan to the flour mill. As a result, people seemingly having a lower price flour, but actual price is 2 times more. Many developing countries in transition economies, they have a very populistic concept of subsidizing with discounted loan to SMEs. They subsidize or they tax exempt VAT tax or customs tax for SMEs, but not for all SMEs. Because it's impossible to subsidize every SMEs, certain group is getting that subsidies. So now SMEs, small and medium enterprises, instead of competing among each other, now they are competing with that discount for this discount loan subsidy. So there are more, if you have a more, because it's limited things. Those who have not that access are in disadvantage. How you can compete with me when I have a twice less expensive financing? So that what my competitors end up doing is they are running after politicians to have the same discount as I do. So they are restricting fair competition. It brings more negative than positive. The same is happening now in the construction industry. Now, Mongolia is supplying artificially 6% mortgage to people who have a work, salary. And with the recent restructuring of economy, because mining, less and less people have this, and they are limiting now this 6% mortgage. And 6% mortgage is like twice or 2.5 times less than the market value that the commercial banks giving. So our central bank is issuing paper money to support this program. At the same time, they supply also constructing companies with special discounted loan to buy construction materials. Since they cannot supply everybody with that, also again, who have connection, who have not connection. Altogether, these sort of things creates this corruption environment. As a result, inflation goes up. Inflation is on the average, I think, 10 to 12% for the last 10 years. Inflation is high, then where the country which has only money market, the interest rate or saving rate is high to attract more saving. Once saving rate is high, then loan rate is even more high. And it's happening in the country where there is no capital market. We have a good exchange, Mongolian stock exchange. Even it is associated and it is equipped with the London Stock Exchange infrastructure. Basically, we can sell and buy whatever shares even in Mongolia and outside of Mongolia. But capital market is not only a stock exchange. This is an issue of stocks, shares, and it's most importantly issues of trust. So because this environment there is no trust, capital market is not developed in spite of all the efforts. So that's why the economy is supplied by only money market, short term, less than 1 year, instruments. So it's very hard to plan for small companies to long term. Larger companies go abroad, buy loans there. As a result, we have this inflation, and with the current outflow and less inflow of foreign direct investment, we have now exchange rate sort of even crisis, 30% down for less than half a year. Then with this environment, people prefer to work for government, not for private businesses. Private business cannot be planned well, they're not competitive. Vice versa, to be government officials, you see, you can handle this sort of murky stuff, and not everybody is having this discounted rate, etc. And it is giving a chance to grow for corruption. So as a result, the economy is becoming non-competitive. It was not competitive, and it is not growing to competitiveness. So this is very briefly the problems we face in our economic transition, major problems. It's very hard to discuss all issues of macroeconomic issues of transition now at this short presentation. That's the first transition challenges we have. Second, I would want to share is a political transition. In a political transition, we have transition from one-party control system to a multi-party system, parliamentarian system. We have selected this parliamentarian system, and now some people are not happy about it. They say, including very high-ranking officials, say that, oh, we should have a strong president like Lee Kuan Yew. I wish the government is as clean as like Lee Kuan Yew government. And they say even like Putin, or like Deng Xiaoping, like Xi Jinping. Last week I was chairing Mongolian Economic Forum annual meeting. I was asking a central bank governor and minister of finance and another cabinet minister. The cabinet minister, young man, said that praying for this sort of countries, I said, how you can the youngest minister of the cabinet and the youngest parliamentarian pray for a country which has no party except one, and another country which has no person except two guys to elect? How you can be Russia or China, our neighbors, be a model for our development? Mongolia is on democracy. It's irreversible. We cannot take this presidential system. It will not work. So parliamentarian system is, well, yet this parliamentarian system has a big problem. As you know, in parliamentarian system we have three separate powers: to be independent, and only their independence will guarantee that the system will work. Unfortunately, this is the case. This is not the case in Mongolia. They made an amendment after 7 years of adoption of our new constitution, an amendment in 2000, in the year of 2000. They made 7 amendments. One of them allowed parliament member to be a cabinet member. This was very blurry thing to, from the beginning people could not catch it very well. Then what happened? Now we have a special phenomena. We call it double dead. Dead is a gun, Mongolian gun. No? And now our parliament member is becoming cabinet member. Then who is responsible for what? Then slowly parliament is not only approving prime minister, but now they are approving each minister. Prime minister has not hiring any firing power. And all of them are parliament members. It's okay in Canada or in UK where you have more than 400 parliamentarians. Mongolia has 76 parliament members, and out of them 15 is a cabinet member. How you can control? It is like we have 76 finance minister. Because everybody is trying to have more money. In spite of all, whatever economic situation is, they want to make guarantee, they ensure that they have more money on their own constituency. They make roads when the road is used maybe once a month by one car. Still they make a road because they want to look good. Yet Ulaanbaatar has so many potholes that I think you disappear with your car sometimes. So this is the anomaly that what's happening. Second block of issue in political transition, I said first this not clear-cut division of powers. B is now campaign financing, political party financing issues. We have laws regulating that, but like many other laws, nobody is following it. First of all, the politicians themselves. Though we have like in your country, we have a limit for donation to political party for companies about 10 million turiks, which is before it was $10,000, now it's $5,000 with our current exchange rate. Because it's become not 1,000, now 2,000 tugriks per dollar. Whatever it is. The law says 10 million tugrik is limit for a company to donate to a political party. For individual, it's only 3 million. Okay, about $3,000 by that time. But in Mongolia, there are such a huge political donations are happening from an individual. They never acknowledge it, but newspapers, the comments, the people are disclosing it. If you donate $1 million to a political party, you are almost guaranteed you to be a parliament member. Because it's a list, proportional and majoritarian list. Some people can go by the list, right? If you donate another $1 million, you will be a cabinet member. If you donate less, then down the road you may be a head of a department or something. And what do you expect from these people once they spend so much money? They certainly, they are investing in a certain way, right? They now need what the investment requires. It requires return. That's, I think, where the corruption is set deeply. And I raise this voice all around the country. I have a lot of support. And now we are challenging to have new law on cabinet, political party financing. Or we ask them even to now report back from the last election. And this report should be audited. Only in that cases we will believe in these current political powers. If not, we will regard them as a liar. We should not elect them. Because the system is intrinsically put into this democratic mode, we have to solve issues through elections, not through riots, through whatever the people, angry people are suggesting. So democracy is something that not only you give power to political parties, but you control. It's like I keep saying, democracy is on two wheels. One is this fair election, the other is fair control by people, by electorate, by constituency, by civic society, which is not happening, which was not, it was in the interest of those who has a power on the right side. So we have to deal with that. So once this political financing transparency is not in place, we have very developed cronyism. And I think political leaders, the heads of political parties, only know from where their big money comes. And I think the political members, party members, I don't think they know well where the money comes from. That's why I think that's one of the reasons this knowledge is with only a few leaders of any political party, and it's very hard to change, rotate the leadership of political parties. So, well, this 25 years, okay, democracy, 25 years experience. We have to eradicate so many of these sort of things like you have been doing for 100 years. There's no ideal system, I know, but still it's very rough. And I believe that we can, that's what I want to be a voice. With this knowledge, with the effort, knowledgeable effort of people, we can change the situation, I think. And I suggest also to have electorate committee, not election committee as we have now. Because election committee is run by somebody, political guy, who is nominated by a winning party. That's unfair. We suggest to have electorate committee. I went to London. I met politicians, parliamentarians in London, and I learned the electorate system. How does it work? They have people who are nominated for 11 years, selected for 11 years, and they rotate 30% each year, every third year or so, that people stay longer. But majority of the people are representing the society, not the political parties. And I think this is something what we should fix. Here I should also mention the third part, ABC part in the second political transition, the role of government. The role of government is, I know you have a strong debate, and I have been visiting in East Coast, West Coast, people meeting in different party campuses. You have different opinions, of course, about the role of the government. But in a particular young economy, young democracy like Mongolia, it must be very clear. Every elected officials think that the role of government is to do everything, to take care of everything. And the system, what you are now, for example, medical care, all this issue, it's different level there. So the role of government should be very clearly defined in a country like Mongolia, who is doing this economic transition, in particular economic and political transition at the same time. Some 3 weeks ago, I have hosted advisors to the president of Myanmar in Mongolia, and they have been very keen asking these issues. And also a delegation from Kyrgyzstan. Because what's happening in Mongolia could be good lessons for many other countries to come to this double or triple transition. So Mongolia is sort of a lab with small few population, but relatively developed democracy, with relatively developed or protected freedom of speech. What I talk now, I talk almost every day or every night on TV. I have a lot of followers. In particular, the role of social media is very strong in Mongolia. And you know about the social media, this impact is so high for a particular less developed country. Now Mongolia we have more cell phones than people, and we have one of the highest penetration of a smartphone, about 50%. And we have a situation where the herdsman in remote area has not electricity in home, but in Ger, but he has the solar energy, which is enough to charge his phone, one TV. And with this phone, this data distribution is so high that this guy can talk and can send money on the cell phone. Because the competition in the commercial bank sector, we have a very well service. On the phone, you can make transactions in Mongolia. It's protected wallet. Because they're competing, they have somehow very good software. The other day was buying things in DC. Then I bought one thing, and the second one was just closed, and I got a message immediately. Please verify that you are doing the second transactions now. Wow, the Mongolian bank service. So what I am seeing is the social media impact is so high that I strongly believe in the mobilization power of social media in the public governance. I have 84,000 Twitter followers, which is 2.5% of the country maybe. It's more important than any other my medias altogether take. I reach so many people at the same time. So this is a role of government is important, and here the people to understand what the government should do and what they should not do. Because the popular politicians promise everything in the world, and just to sake of gaining advantage of it, and to take a power. So the last smaller part of my contribution is social transition. Freedom of speech, as I told you, boosted, of course, participation of every Mongolian in the political process. That's the shaping our social transition. Freedom of travel and residence. We had probably largest diaspora compared to your own amount of population. We have 100,000 people living abroad, many thousand here in this country and also in this state. It's freedom of choice. They go. But they shape the way they think and the way Mongolians, their relatives, think back. In particular, at this time when the foreign direct investment is shallow, this is the money which is coming to the country, supporting the exchange rate. So that's why I go and I usually invite it to Mongolian community. I was in Taiwan this year, Japan, Germany, Washington, D.C., here. In 5 places I met Mongolian community. They are eager to listen to somebody who is non-political, who is not running for office, who is not representing any political party, who is not afraid of sharing her thoughts on current issues. And another factor, half of this 3 million people population is under 30 years old. And that's very particular demographic peculiarity I understand and we should know. Because 20 years from now, we have brand new generation, brand new country almost. So this 100,000 people living abroad is a huge factor of, I think, our economic and social development, progress in the country. With private education at all levels, we suddenly see the huge difference in the quality of education at all levels. We have private schools, private universities, many of them. And the next one in our social transition, which is playing an important factor, is very badly and ignorantly planned urbanization in Ulaanbaatar city. All previous our mayor and political powers. By the way, Ulaanbaatar is one of the cities where we don't elect our mayor directly. It is at least approved by the prime minister at the end. And I'm opposing it. And I think we should be in a position to elect our own mayor directly. Well, it is a huge change in constitution. It will take a long time for this amendments. If it is changed, I want to run for that. Or, very simply, because I am from working family, from a rural part of Ulaanbaatar, Shanki, this part of the Ulaanbaatar city. My father and mother are blue-collar workers. And this, where I was born and grown up, the conditions are not changed for half of Ulaanbaatar citizens today. Those who were in Ulaanbaatar know what I talk about. I'm from there, and I studied. I went to. That time was more, I think, more fair competitions. I think I was able to be accepted to Moscow State University, and later on I worked hard, and I'm a very lucky person to have a U.S. Ed scholarship to make MBA at this school. So I want to give back. I want to change the children who had the same conditions I had 40 years ago. And instead, Ulaanbaatar city management, our mayors in the roles, they were taking personally advantage on speculating our land, huge corruption in the small town. I cannot believe that 3-room apartments in Ulaanbaatar city more expensive than a house in Denver. $250,000 will start good house in this town, right? In Mongolia, you can hardly buy 3-room apartment. And yet, 34,000 apartments are ready for sale today. Staying at night, no owner. On the other side, 170,000 families are staying in areas where they have not proper sanitation. They want to have a house. There are houses, but they cannot buy it. It's too expensive. So I think we expect down the road a change in our real estate market. Some bust, I think. I don't know to which degree, like here or like in Japan, real estate at 70s, but there is going to be some substantial change. So these are the 3 very shortly three transitions in the country. And my final remark is, so what shall we do? I try always to answer as much as possible, because criticizing is so easy. If you don't contribute to solutions, then it is not worth, isn't it? So what I suggest is very short, 3 sentences, and then I'll finish. So as I told you now, transition is on. We will go further. Keeps going on its very bumpy roads. Challenges are huge. In a political reform, I suggest, first of all, to do political parties reform and financing of political parties, financing structure of political parties, and have more transparency. That's the issue we must change in order to make our political transition successful. It is an issue of probably financing from the budget political parties who took more seats in parliament. That would be much cheaper than they being financed from somebody and producing corruption. In economy, very simple solution I suggest. We're all pragmatic people. In this school, in many business schools, they teach you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So I suggest to have a good measure, not the GDP per capita, GDP, NGP. I suggest to have a productivity as a major measure, main measurement. Productivity of everything, organizations, companies, government, per unit of resources. What is your productivity? There are only 4 types of resources in the world: financial, material, human, and time. So if you measure success with productivity, then progress will be seen and manageable. Where productivity, it doesn't come from the role of government or from the sincere heart of the people. Productivity comes from competition, fair competition. Make fair competition, there will be productivity. It eliminates all these problems I just now described about economic policy of governments. So, productivity is driven by fair competition. That productivity will make Mongolian economy, industry, competitive. And we should take, in that sense, China and Russia to our eternal neighbor, not as a challenge, as opportunity. Huge market. I started my TV work very by chance. One day I got a call from a friend. He said, "Jargal, you should interview one guy. His name is Parag Khanna. He is a U.S. business political consultant. Google hired him. Maybe you know him. He is very famous. Young Kissinger, I would say, Parag Khanna. And he came to Mongolia because he wrote a book calling Mongolia, not Mongolia, but Mongolia. The term comes from him. And he also said that China will take all the way to Ural Mountains. Such a statement for Mongolians and Russians. So I said, but I'm not a TV person. He said, this is not a question of you. You just ask the guy and then you just explain what is his comment. So I got interview. It was my first interview, and you can see on my website as a first interview. Fascinating interview. So we should take this opportunity of being between two countries, to a large market, as opportunity. I suggested even, I made a Tet Ulaanbaatar speech in which I said Mongolia will be next Panama. Why? Panama, the role of Panama, the role of Suez Channel, canal. Mongolia can be landlocked or land bridge of Europe and Asia. Mongolia can be a trading hub between China and Russia, Europe. And why? Because there was a test. If you remember, there was a BBC documentary. They were sending a 40 tons container from Shanghai to Hamburg, one through Mongolia, the other is through by land, the other is through by sea. By land, it was 2 times short, 2 weeks they reached there, and it was 2 times cheaper and 2 times faster. By sea, it was twice more. Only problem. The largest railway network in the world is US, your country. Second, China. Third, Russia. The problem between China and Russia is there's a gauge difference, 85 millimeter, like this. And now what happens at the border with China, not with Russia? We transfer everything from one gauge to another gauge. It costs a lot of money. So I suggest, look, let the China go all the way to the country, to the deep of the Mongolia, Russia from the north, and we will have all the switching hubs of logistics. And it will make truly Mongolia Panama because it will be cheaper. Now the Russians talk about direct connection with China through Altai Mountain. Try to make a railroad through the Rocky Mountains on the top. Not visible, not feasible. So that proposal was received very well. Even our speaker was quoting at several international conferences. And this sort of things. What will happen? Mongolia will be not only a railway logistic center, but it was a financial center because transaction between Europe can be made the one tranche when it crosses south border, the other tranche when it crosses north border. See, the payment tranches, you see. And the road across west to east Mongolia can be four railways, 4 rails. There is such a case. In between, by the way, Finland and Mongolia are only 2 countries around the Soviet Union which has the same gauge like Russia, the Soviet Union before. Finland and Sweden have 4 railway connection, 4, like this. Cannot be 3 because it's worn out very fast. So there should be. All Mongolian horizontal railways, I suggest, to be like this. And it should be run by professionals, not Chinese, not Mongolians, not Russians, but mostly international. And it's an issue also language. I never seen Chinese speak. I never expect China, whole country, will speak Russian and vice versa. So Mongolia can be also that hub. So that's what is we should see as an economy opportunity. And our last one is about, I actually almost this, okay, I suggest in this social transition to be more, Dalai Lama called it secular ethics. And at the beginning is shown my interview with Dalai Lama in New Delhi, December 19th last year. Amazing person. And he said that Mongolia has everything. You have a freedom. You have economy growing. Outside world is booming. Now make sure that your inside world is better. What does that mean? You stay in peace with your inner world. That's, I think, general message which provoked me to think that we are doing huge spiritual transition. In some way we are lost too, because we say we are Buddhists. No, we are more atheists in Mongolia. 70 years of communist regime made us all atheists. So these are the 3 challenges. I cannot pull all together everything what I have prepared. A little bit, I think, took a little bit longer time. But I'm sharing these thoughts with each of you, not only because you are interested, you know Mongolia, but also that's human nature, what we go through. That's other nations will go through. And if together sharing our thoughts, in particular lessons we learn, I thought will make the world we live better. Thank you.
Jargal. It was very informative.
Thank you.
We've got about 15 minutes left, and so we'd like to open it up for some questions and answers over the next 15 minutes. I thought I'd kick it off. I had a few questions. So I just wanted to ask you, the World Bank has predicted continued slowing the economic growth in 2015, and even if the FDI recovers, they see it staying flat during 16 and 17. What is your estimate about the change in Mongolia, and do you feel the government's on the right path right now with what the Prime Minister's been talking about?
Well, you know, a week before I left, I was in D.C. at the IMF and the World Bank annual meeting, where they have now a new goal, as you know. We had the Millennium Development Goal, as you know. Now we have a Sustainable Development Goals, new challenge in front of all of us to